Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with more live podcasting action. And I have my good friend John Dykes coming on to our virtual podcasting studio this rainy afternoon right here in Singapore. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Before that, a really short introduction. I think it's always great to introduce my next guest. Well, he's a sports broadcaster who's famous in this part of the world. He hosts the John Dykes Show on Fox Sports Asia. He was previously lead anchor for the Premier League content service available to international broadcast partners. And he made his name firstly in Asia after working for almost a decade as host of ESPN STAR Sports coverage of the English Premier League and European football. He's now a familiar face worldwide and anchored the Africa-wide coverage of the 2014 FIFA World Cup for SuperSport TV. So without further ado, let's bring him on to our live podcasting studio. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Wayne. Thank you very much. You are right. It is pouring here in Singapore. Kind of appropriate. You know, we're fixated on the Premier League opening weekend, so we got some nice rain. I just think it sets the scene well for us.
Most definitely. I think it's going to be a really exciting season once again. I think we all have this a huge hangover after Euro 2020, right? I am sure that, you were fully, embracing the great progress of the England team as well when it made all the way to the final. But unfortunately, they lost to Italy, which who are a really great team, by the way. So how was your entire experience of Euro 2020? Do you enjoy every singular moment watching it on telly or making, content about it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I found it really interesting on two levels. Let's deal with the football side of things first. I think like a lot of us born in Britain, people who've spent the whole of their lives or most of their lives overseas, I feel a bit kind of hypocritical if I get too hyper patriotic. So I'm not kind of rah rah, and I detest that thing about coming home. I'm sorry, I like the song. But I just don't like the sentiment. I think it just kind of reinforces that arrogance thing. Just look at what Kasper Schmeichel had to say and what Chiellini and company had to say about it. So I don't like that stuff. But I do like Gareth Southgate. He's someone who I've worked with. I was in touch with Gareth during the course of the tournament. I know his number two, Steve Holland, really well from his time at Chelsea when we were neighbours actually for a while. So I really follow their progress with the England team with a lot of interest. And I was so impressed by what they did because it was a difficult tournament to play in. I think the English got a major advantage in that they got to play at home about all of the time, whereas the logistics made it so hard for other teams. But I think what they did was they came up with some really good solutions to problems in individual matches, the way they chopped and changed the team, the way they didn't bow in the face of critics or the public or, this clamor for Grealish to be playing all the time. The only problem was they got all the way to the final. They got stronger and stronger. And then it just, the thing about this, and you're absolutely right. Italy were magnificent. And I think Roberto Mancini's work is I wouldn't say it's underrated. I think people in the game know how good he is. But this team has just gone on this run forever, running into this tournament, reinventing themselves, taking themselves from nowhere really to being what they are right now. And they had so much ambition. All these stupid stereotypes about Italian football being, catenaccio and defensive, they're long left behind because this was a team that played on the front foot, a team that played well, that took control of games, found solutions. In Chiesa, they had a real superstar. I love the way he plays. And I think the thing that was interesting about the final, Wayne, was that England scored too early. Now, I know it sounds like a dumb thing to say, but we've seen it down the years. We've seen it Euro 96. We've seen it in a World Cup. The problem with England sides is there's this innate, nature in which it's this kind of English sort of conservatism, isn't it? In what you do is you go, oh, right, okay, well, as much as we want to keep going forward, we'll it's human nature to just sit back and be a bit conservative. And playing the formation they did with those wing backs who actually generated the goal, there was always going to be a problem that if they didn't stay on the front foot and pen the Italians in, the Italians would get control, particularly of midfield. So even though Harry Kane was dropping deep all the time and trying to help out, it was never going to be sustainable. So the Italians got control of the game. England got into a kind of defensive mentality. And then the key thing for me was throughout the tournament, England showed that they could really stay steady and solid in a game, and then they could impact it with the substitutes. But unfortunately, it went the other way because Gareth was making substitutions from a kind of defensive position. So they weren't able to come on and provide the impact he wanted, whereas the Italians grew into the game. You knew they were going to score, at some time in the 90s. I knew they did. And then, of course, the players that they had come on, like Bernardeschi and company, they did brilliantly. So they really played well. But I was frustrated because England could have been better. And whether or not Gareth was right to play with those wing backs, I'm still not sure. I just felt that if they'd maintained control of the game and then thrown on the impact players, maybe that's the way England could have won it. The other side of it is a media side of things, but I'll let you get a word in here, Wayne.
Very insightful as usual, John. I love, how you riffed about the tournament that has actually been more than, I think, months old already. And it seems like it just happened yesterday, right? And we're still talking about the final. Yeah. But today we're not going to be talking about final. But of course, Chiesa is one of the players that I would love to watch again and again and again. But unfortunately, he wasn't signed, for Liverpool, even though he was linked to Liverpool at one point. But of course, Liverpool, my favorite club, of course, they have actually signed very few players during this season. And perhaps there will be more, development in that area in the weeks to come before the window closes. But today, we are inviting you to come onto the show to talk about one very important topic, which is basically your predictions on season ahead, which has already started last night with Arsenal losing 2-0 to Brentford. Surprise, surprise. And, let's maybe start off by doing this segment called Here We Go, your season predictions for 2021-22. Tell us, as is traditional, tell me who will win the league.
Oh, here we go. Throw me that one. You know me well enough to know that my whole career has been based around me, by and large, asking questions and remaining in a position of neutrality. But yeah, for the last few years, I've been hosting my own show, and I've had to be more opinionated, and I do occasionally stick my head above the parapets and what have you. But when it comes to things like this, I've done so many Premier League seasons, and I've done so many things where people say, right, okay, you've got to tell us 1, 2, 3, and 4, who's going to be 18, 19, and 20, who's this, that, and the other. And I sort of sit here and I think to myself, why? I mean, I don't actually support any of the clubs involved. I don't gamble. So, for me, it doesn't really matter. But I tell you what I do like, Wayne, and I've always done this, particularly as a broadcaster, is I like to sit here and say to myself, what would be the most compelling narrative? As I host pre-shows, as I host magazine content, as the season spins on and plays out, what would be a really compelling narrative? So I think, to answer your question, I think what would be really compelling is if Manchester City didn't win it. Yeah, they're the favourites, or just about the favourites. I think maybe joint favourites with Chelsea. That's the way I see it. But if they get their hands on Harry Kane, then they are definitely the favourites to win it. So I think what I might do is I might say, let's argue that maybe Manchester City, who aren't ready for the start of the season, don't get me wrong. I just think they're undercooked at the moment. They've got key players, notably De Bruyne, who aren't ready to start the season. Grealish is going to take a while to bed in. I'm fascinated to see what exactly it is that Pep Guardiola thinks he can make of Grealish. I'm really excited about what he can turn him into, but I think that's going to be a work in progress. You might argue that they don't get off to a great start. I mean, Spurs, that's another story for later, but Spurs could turn them over. Spurs could beat them yesterday. Man City started badly last season, terrible start. They still cantered to the title. So they're favourites, but I think Chelsea winning it would be really interesting for me. I think Tuchel is demonstrating everything he touches turns to gold. Just look at his substitution in the Super Cup the other night in Mondi and his defence. He's got a fantastic, solid foundation. Lukaku in there is just going to score tons of goals. And, of course, it's a solid side. So I think Chelsea, if City don't win it, Chelsea would have to be the next favourites, I think. So let's put them down for that. But I think what makes this season really compelling, I know you're waiting for me to say Liverpool, is that Manchester United have put it out there. They've made the signings in Sancho and Varane. They've given Solskjaer the contract. They have absolutely laid it out. We have to win the league this year. That is the minimum requirement. And it's going to work one of two ways. One way is that what they've done, this urgency drives them to the title. Because make no mistake, with Varane and Maguire at the back, with Shaw, in the form he's in, if they can fix up a couple of things in midfield, maybe if Van der Beek finally grows into the role, with Sancho I think he's going to be fantastic. He's a superb player, underrated, I think, in certain quarters. They've got what it could take to win the Premier League. And then there's Liverpool, who are going to do it the way Liverpool like to do it. I think that Klopp's already saying, hey, look, these other guys are buying. We're just going to have to be the best we can be. We can only buy if we move players on. Konate's come in, but I don't think he's the first choice. I think Konate's there, as a kind of a reinforcement in that sort of central defense makeup. He's going to have to do it with what he's got, with the inclusion of Harvey Elliott, who I think is really exciting player, just what Liverpool need, that link, really, that talented ball-carrying link from midfield to attack. Jota will, of course, break up the established front three, so I think that's going to be a continuation. And you can never write Klopp and Liverpool off, because I just think, he is so inspirational. They have so much talent, particularly in Salah with Virgil van Dijk back in the side. So 4 teams for you, but I think the compelling narratives would be if either Chelsea or Manchester United got themselves in the hunt and gave themselves a chance to win it, rather than City or Liverpool, who we've seen win it in recent times. So that, for me, is the one. Maybe Chelsea, maybe United would be a bit of drama, but I don't know.
This seems to be the common narrative, right? Everyone is predicting, Man City is not going to win it, because I think it's super boring to actually see them win Premier League again. And many are going for Chelsea because they are slightly less dull. So I think you belong to that school. And definitely my heart disagrees. I think Liverpool is still going to be up there. And I think that Minamino is going to have a phenomenal season. Yeah,
I think they'll be up there, Wayne. It's just a question of if they've got enough to get there. I think City aren't boring. Don't get me wrong. I think City are magnificent, and I think when they play really well, I honestly think it's as good as anything that you'll see. It's just Chelsea would be a bit different. I mean, listen, Man United would be a better story, quite frankly, because they've had such a struggle, haven't they, in recent seasons in terms of the Premier League being competitive. So that would be a story.
Liverpool fans out there disagree. But of course, you mentioned about the boring part. It's definitely boring to predict Man City. So I'm just glad that you put Chelsea that. Definitely, okay. I think they're less down. So let's move on to the next question. How about the rest of the top 4 in order? And I think this is the part that nobody ever gets right. So I'm going to put you in the corner. Tell us the rest of the top 4 in order.
You can ask me to do it, but as long as you don't, make too much of it. Because the thing about this, right, is if I was to do this, if I was to say at the end of the season, somebody is going to hear and they're going to judge me on this, right? And there's going to be some kind of a punishment if I don't get this right. I would say Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester United. But because I've just said what I've said, right, then I have to sort of flick Man City out of the equation. Then I probably go Chelsea, Man City, and then Liverpool and Man United. No, I'll go Man United and Liverpool, right? But the other school of thought is, and a lot of my friends have had to do this recently because they've done what I've done and they've said, oh, not City. I've seen a bunch of people have to put City down 4th, and then you do that and you go, hang on a minute, how does that happen? So I think, there are 2 things. There's if my life depended on it, the first choice, because we're having fun, I'll stick City down in 4th. I'll have Liverpool in 3rd, and I'll have United 2nd and Chelsea 1st.
I have City in 4th as well. Yeah.
If that comes about, we are in for an amazing season.
Give us your 3 picks for relegation, please.
Listen, Brentford at top of the table. Okay, I'm only joking. It's one game, and I expected them to beat Arsenal. I'm sorry, Arsenal have got all kinds of problems. Notably, just look at the team they put out last night. But I think defensively, they were second best. I was just chatting with some Arsenal fans right now. A lot of them are going on about Leno being fouled in the build up to that second goal, where the throw was allowed to bounce in the 6-yard box. I think really, even if you think it was a foul, and I think it doesn't always get given, I think that kind of contact happens all the time. I think he was bullied a bit, and either he or his defense needed to sort that problem out. But it could have been given. But that's not the point. The point of the game is they were outplayed by Brentford. Brentford will do that to teams this year. Brentford will survive, I think. They're good enough to. Norwich have got a bit about them in that when they're allowed to play, they can be really good fun. And if Todd Cantwell is fit, I know he's a doubt for the Liverpool game, he makes a huge difference to them. The loss of Buendia is a big problem for them, but they have got a lot. There's a guy called Lees Moore I saw the other night playing, who I think is really nice going forward. So they've got a bit about them. They might play enough football if someone else is bad enough to get out of the bottom 3. Watford, I think, as solid as they might have looked last season, I think they don't have quite enough quality for the Premier League. So I'm going to put Watford in as 1. All right, so I have Watford in as 1. I'm going to go with a kind of blindly optimistic, don't put Norwich in there. Let's see if they can stay up this time and have some fun, which means you've got to then pick 2 of the incumbents who might struggle. And when I'm looking at the sides that I fear a bit for Southampton. I think losing Danny Ings was just a body blow for them, and losing maybe their best central defender to Leicester as well is going to be a huge problem for them. So I think Southampton could struggle this year. I think it might be Brighton or Burnley's turn to struggle as
Not
well.
Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace have freshened things up. I think Vieira is going to be an interesting pick, and a lot of people think he might be the first manager to get booted. So my three would be Watford, Southampton, and Brighton.
Okay. I do agree with you.
Palace and Burnley somewhere around about there. I think they could struggle this year.
Yeah, and I also agree with you that I think Brentford will be comfortable. And Villa, I think many people are placing that as favorites for relegation just because of the Jack Grealish, Grealish factor. I think they will actually thrive. Villa,
yeah. Villa are going to be the West Ham. Villa have got the potential. The thing about that, Wayne, is obviously, Grealish goes, and everyone fixated initially on his immediate replacements. Okay, Ings, great piece of business. Bailey, good player, like him. Buendia, sensational piece of business. If you look at the stats from last time Norwich were in the Premier League, right? They got relegated. They were pretty miserable. But his chance creation stats were right up there. And he had a stellar season in the Championship. So he's fantastic. But the thing about Villa is that they augment a team that I already really liked. Martinez, he led Fantasy Premier League by 26 points from Ederson last season. 26 points, best goalkeeper out there. You've got Konsa, who I think is a really outstanding defender. Target and Cash, really, really good players. John McGinn, he'll step up in Grealish's absence, I think. I think they're a really solid outfit, and there are more. And then you add those guys I mentioned in terms of the signings to Villa. So, yeah, they look to me like the side best placed to sort of do a Leeds, but even better, maybe do a West Ham, get up there on the fringes of the top six and be in that kind of conversation.
Now tell us, who will win the Golden Boot? It's coming fast, by the way. I have more questions lined up.
Yeah, it's going to be either, I would say it will be either Lukaku or Salah. Because I'm not sure where Harry Kane. I'm not sure where Harry Kane's at right now.
I think it will be Salah, but obviously my predictions don't matter. You're the expert, but I agree with you. That Salah will be top two, if not winning this outright. Which new signing will have the greatest positive impact?
I think Sancho might be the one. Sancho is an amazing player in terms of his contribution, goal scoring and assisting. We didn't see a lot of him at the Euros. I spoke about Gareth Southgate earlier on. In the one game when he played him, he did exactly what he can do. He runs in behind. He shows such great energy. And I really think it was a shame that he wasn't able to come on and do that in a solid, with a solid foundation in the final. That would have been very special. But I think he will be just what Manchester United need. I think he will create so much. He will score a good number of goals. Because remember, they haven't gone out right now and bought that marquee centre forward. They've continued with Cavani. Rashford's out for a couple of months. I think Fernandes will chip in as usual from midfield. So I think Sancho will step in there. I think he's going to be a really important player, and he's so good. There was this really strange narrative when the move didn't go through last year to Manchester United. A lot of people sort of just ignored him because Haaland rose at Dortmund. Haaland became the story. And the English press just switched off. They were just like, all right, there are other people to focus on now. And they started talking about Grealish and, going into the Euros, it was Grealish. And don't get me wrong, he's a fine player and all that. But suddenly Sancho must have been thinking, hang on a minute. And sure enough, United get him for 73 million. And it looks like, to my mind, 73 million well spent. So I'm going to go with Sancho.
I totally agree. I even though I hate to say this, I think that Jadon Sancho, United haven't had a decent right winger for a long time, right? And they've now got one of the world's best in that position. That leads to the next question. Which one will turn out to be a massive flop?
As you know, this is not the kind of area I like to go into too much because I can't see any great positives in this apart from getting some clicks and headlines and what have you. Flop. Let's define flop, shall we? I think Ben White's, through no fault of his own, gonna have a lot of pressure on him because when you buy English, you end up paying inflated prices. And, when the Ben White situation is interesting because the minute that he cost £50 million, right? The minute that happened for a player who'd played prior to this season, had played 36 Premier League games, right? The minute he cost 50 million, Daniel Levy took notice of that and he went, okay, well, if someone like him is 50 million, then Harry's got to be 150, because that's the inflated market that you deal with English players. I think White's actually quite a solid defender. I think he's somebody who could grow. But the problem is, I don't know if Arsenal's the club at which he can grow because, he got given a tough time by Evan Toney last night. He hasn't got a really solid, if he went into a team and worked alongside someone like Ruben Diaz, as John Stones has been able to do, he could really grow, I think. But the problem he's got is he's going to be working from a position of insecurity. So I hate to label anyone a flop, but I think if there's a big money signing who's going to find it hard this season, I think it'll be him.
Yeah, I think one of my previous podcast guests, who's basically the scout who scouted him, Ben White, of course, before he joined Brighton and then to Arsenal, right? I think he would disagree, but I think it's great, that we are going to be looking at some of the biggest bargains as well as the biggest, flops in the upcoming Premier League as well. So that leads to the next question for you: who will be the biggest bloody bargain?
Bargains. Okay, so let's have a little look at that. I'm just trying to think. Villa's business has been good. I think Buendia could turn out to be a really really good signing, but he was not that cheap. And Danny Ings for 30 million, I think it could turn out to be very good business. But I'm very loath to call a 30 million pound player a bargain. I'll tell you the player that I would be really interested in, and I think Leicester spent again quite a bit of money on him. But Patson Daka, have you seen much of Daka? Because he is. Right, this guy. If you go and have a little look at some of the goals he scored for Salzburg, he's part of the Red Bull family, right? This guy, I think Jamie Vardy is going to be waning. I just think physically, eventually it's catching up with him. This guy runs in behind, and when you give him a sniff of goal, bang, bang, it goes in the corners, a bit like Robbie Fowler used to do. Just a natural finisher, full of confidence, great athlete. I think Patson Daka could turn out to be someone that maybe surprises people, if only because a lot of people haven't seen much of him.
Yeah, agree. And I think there's another player top of my mind, Demarai Gray. I think he transferred to Everton for peanuts, right? That's a really good player in there, don't you think?
Yeah, that was a weird one, wasn't it? Like 1.5 million or less
peanuts,
than 2 million. Yeah,
incredible.
Something like that. Demarai Gray was always interesting to me. I mean, when I think back to that Leicester side, I always thought, the one that won the league, right? I thought that he was naturally then going to just come through and be a big part of the team. And it never really happened. And he looked to me like a kind of an impact player. And that's how they used him. He came on, he's got the skills and everything like that, but just never really kicked on. And then, of course, left England, comes back in with a lot to prove. And I think what's going to be interesting about that is he's coming into a club that are going to struggle to settle, I think, at the start of this season. So, yeah, I think it's going to be tough for him, to be honest with you. And I don't know if he's necessarily going to flourish.
Yeah, I just Googled. It's actually for the sum of 1.7 million pounds. That is surely a snip. I think a couple of seasons back, he could have easily moved from Leicester for like 40 million pounds and over. So who will be named the PFA Player of the Year?
Oh, PFA. Okay, PFA. Well, the PFA is interesting because, of course, they always go for a story, don't they? It's always interesting. I think there's this funny thing going on in the world of football now, right? There's different ways of consuming football. There's the kind of journalistic, traditional way of doing it, editorialized way in which the PFA goes to somebody whose contribution to football as a whole is recognized. And then you have the sort of Penaldo, Pessi, fanboy nonsense out there whose whole perception of football is based around the Ballon d'Or and like GOAT arguments and all that clickbait crap, right? And the funny thing about them is they always get up in arms about any award. I grew up never giving a damn about awards. Football's a team game, right? So the generation that I was in, I couldn't even tell you who won the Ballon d'Or. I didn't know it. I couldn't tell you about anything like that. And then suddenly, because of social media and because of fanboys and fangirls and this whole kind of new way of consuming football, it developed, some interest. But I was always interested in the PFA award because they kind of recognize someone who contributed beyond just, stats, goals and assists and what have you, or even Instagram followers. So they go for a story. So if you're asking me to go for PFA, again, you're asking me for what the narrative would be. So I think what would be interesting there is if, for example, Van Dijk came back and Liverpool won the league and he had a great season, someone like that could turn out to be the winner because they broke the mold, didn't they, by going for Diaz. You don't often get defenders picked. There are so many angles. What if Harry Kane does get his move and scores 40 goals? What if he stays and scores a ton of goals? That could be really interesting. But if you're going to go on who wins the league and what the performances are, if Chelsea are to win the league, as I keep saying, then Lukaku would have to have a look in because I think if they do win the league, he will be highly instrumental in that. So let's throw him in there.
Yeah, I think Harry Kane likely to be the best player in the division again, but somehow will be overlooked if he joins City, right, and just become another cog in the relentless City.
Oh no, he wouldn't be that. No, if he joins City, I think there's something I'll take issue with you there. If he joins City, he could be 40 to 50 goal a season striker in all competitions. Because remember when he did that interview with Gary Neville and he said, I want to get up to Ronaldo and Messi levels. And he meant it seriously. He's not the sort of guy who banters about stuff like that, Harry. And I think he recognized that perhaps the only way he could do that is if he joined this team that had just so much in the way of, assisting capacity for him that he could just, do a Lewandowski, shall we say, and really hit those big numbers. That would be the parallel. I don't think you could draw the Messi, Ronaldo, golden era parallel. I'd say more like a Lewandowski, get those big 40+ numbers.
First manager to leave their Premier League job. I think earlier on you mentioned about Patrick Vieira is one of the favorites, right? In your opinion, who would be the first manager to leave?
Yeah, it's funny. Again, this is probably even more hateful than having to predict it's going to be a flop. I imagine in any other walk of life, if you said, "Hey, I'm going to predict which CEO is going to get sacked," that's not really nice,
terrible,
is it?
It's horrible.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing to do. But I think again we could tie it to a team's fortunes. I think. Do we trust in the process at Arsenal? I think the problems at Arsenal go so deep, or should I say so high, that it's not always the fault of who's in charge managing the side. But, their next two games are against Chelsea and Manchester City. If they go into the international break in the relegation zone, if they don't turn things around after that, then suddenly what happens is you get this noise, don't you? You get this noise around a football club, and that could lead to problems for Mikel Arteta. I think what is more likely is that if one of the teams that we suggested might struggle, and I don't think Norwich or Watford are a sacking club. So you always have to suggest that they will sack the first manager, because no one survives at Watford. So you park them a little bit, and then you look at Norwich. And I think, whatever happens to Norwich, they'll show faith in the guy. He's tremendous, right? I think whatever happens at Brentford, and I think they'll do fine anyway. I think Thomas Frank's fine. So you look maybe at if there's a disastrous start for Palace, Vieira, if there's a disastrous start for Southampton, or if there's a disastrous start for Brighton or Burnley, maybe. I doubt Sean Dyche would go, but so yeah, I don't think. I think I'll give you a name. I just think manager of one of those clubs could be the first to go.
Totally agree with you. It's never a thrill to predict which manager to leave first. But you mentioned about a disaster happening to one of those clubs you mentioned, Southampton, right? I think if they complete the 9-0 trilogy, right, Ralph Hasenhuttl will definitely leave. Yeah. So this is
he survived 9-0. He survived 9-0, mate. He's
about 9 years. Yeah. I thought that would be incredible. Pick the Champions League winner.
Oh. But of course, you know what I'm expected to say here. Someone said to me the other day, they said, if PSG don't win the Champions League, it will be a disgrace. What a load of nonsense. I think one of the biggest problems is this. If you say our holy grail or our number one overriding ambition is to win something, I couldn't think of anything tougher than the Champions League. Because the thing about, just ask Manchester City, right? The thing about the Champions League is you could, as they did last season, arrive in such fantastic shape at the end of the season with everybody flying, with just the team clicking and functioning, everything like that. And it only takes one bad day. Not necessarily the final. It could happen in a semi-final. It could be one of the legs somewhere or other. you just need to have one bad day, and that's the Champions League gone. So there have been some really good teams that haven't won the Champions League. And then there have been some teams that are okay, but they just rise to the occasion. Real Madrid had a habit of doing that. They had serial Champions League final winners in the likes of Ronaldo and Ramos, didn't they? So you've got to look for the club that I think has got the potential to sort of just cruise along and then get the job done in the final. I think it would be great to say PSG, because PSG, if they were to win it, presumably along the way, they would do some bloody amazing things, because if they were playing well and those guys were clicking, that would be quite remarkable. But I think I'll do this. If I'm going to let Premier League go the way of Man City, I'll give them the Champions League this year. City to win the Champions League.
Wow. I think PSG for me, because it's like, if not now, never. But then again, stranger things have happened, especially in the Champions League, right? So that leads to the last question. We have just surpassed 30-minute mark. I don't want to hold you the whole entire afternoon, because there's more Premier League action to enjoy later on. Tell us in 5 words. Tell us what you are most excited about this season.
The fans being back. It's 4.
The bloody fans being back. That counts as
I think
5,
the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The bloody. I'll give you bloody. Look, the thing about it is I work for the Premier League, or either directly or in broadcasters that were partnering with the Premier League for so many years, and down the years, so many people ask me what it is that made the league so successful, and of course there are a number of factors about it. But I always felt that it was just the sheer euphoria and exuberance and the quality and the loud, sound and the color and everything surrounding the Premier League broadcast, which of course was a result of the Premier League match day experience. And I just think that's huge. And we've experienced it already in a really amazing occasion at Brentford's new stadium. And it's just going to keep going. I mean, just listen out for Old Trafford, because that United Leeds, that's going to be noisy, and it's not the only one this weekend. But I think that's what I'm looking forward to most. And
football is finally back in a proper way. My 5 words is a proper bloody title race. I think that's what everyone who's a football lover, they really want to see. It doesn't really matter sometimes whether your most hated team or your most favorite team wins, right? We just want to see a race that's going to be sustainable and it's going to go right down to the last few seconds of a game.
We spoke about that though, didn't we? I think, we laid that out. Those 4 teams that I spoke about, I think we're in for a special season, yeah.
Fantastic. Before we let you go, do you have another 3 minutes to do a rapid fire round?
Yeah, sure. Okay, go on.
So the rules are pretty simple. You must give really short and pithy response, maximum of 1 or 2 sentences. Are you ready?
Yep.
Let's go. What are your proudest life moments?
Marrying an amazing woman, having 2 truly incredible daughters. That would be one of them. I think the other one would be hosting international coverage of being blessed to be chosen to host international coverage of the world's most popular football league. And the last one, on a purely personal level, would be, purely selfishly, winning a gold medal in a Spartan race at the age of 55, which I think was 30, let me think, that would have been something like 37 years after my previous gold medal, which I think was won running a 400-meter Hong Kong schools race. So that sporting success is something that I think I'm quite excited about.
That's amazing, my friend. If I could complete even a Spartan race without winning a medal, I'll be properly proud,
So age group goal. I should stress age group goal, man. Okay, this is
all right.
CPF category.
Still an incredible life moment. What do you want doing less of in 2021?
I want to be doing less enforced home-based work. I like getting out and working in offices and studios and meeting people and being out and about. So a little bit less of the of this stuff. I don't mean the broadcast stuff. I mean just the sort of sitting here doing Zoom calls and stuff.
Totally agree with you on that one, because I'm looking at my LinkedIn news feed, right? I'm so jealous of people who are attending or heading for Stamford Bridge or Anfield tonight. I wish I could be the one attending a game at Anfield. But of course, these are things that we all aspire to have, in the future.
Well, get along to
yeah.
the Singapore Premier League. I did that the other night, and I really enjoyed it. I got out to Jurong East and I watched Lion City Sailors against Albirex. And, the crowds are back in. They're going to be getting back up to 500 and beyond. And I think getting out to watch football is the key. And whether it be grassroots football, local football, go for that.
That's a great idea. I always wanted to catch Lion City Sailors in action, so you just gave me a great suggestion. Next one, what do you want doing more of in 2021?
Oh, more of. I think I'd like to be able to spend a little bit more time with my wife on the evenings. I work quite a lot of evenings, and she's brilliant. She waits for me, but maybe just having a few dinners together, and we're going to be empty nesters fairly soon. Well, we got one of our daughters overseas at college, and the other one's going to be going early next year, I think. So I think a bit of quality us time would be really nice. I'd like to be doing all those outdoor things you spoke about. I think it'd be really nice to be just getting outside and doing stuff. And on a professional level, it would be good, I think, to be doing something that gives back to the community. If I want to try and ratchet up a little bit more of giving back into my sort of portfolio.
That's fantastic to hear. The next one is slightly morbid, but it's just for fun. What would you like? What would you want written or carved on your tombstone?
That's not something.
Jürgen Klopp's answer for that question was a nice guy, right?
Yeah, I know. I think.
So, what would be your answer?
How about one of those? How about one of those sort of things where you use like a cheesy line that I use? I think thanks for watching. So something like that. One of the lines that I just used to death. I don't think I could say hello and welcome because that's not appropriate on there. But I think maybe thanks for watching or something like that. I don't know.
I like that one. Your advice for TV broadcasters, sports broadcasters, or journalists?
Well, the industry is changing enormously right now. So I think what's interesting is the pathways, presumably people asking for advice on how they can do it are different. But I think the key to this one is when everyone sort of comes to me and says to me, all right, I think the most important thing is that first and foremost, I'm a fan or I'm a sports nut or whatever. I go, that's nice. First and foremost, you've got to be a damn good broadcaster or a journalist. Be that at the same time, be you're a sports fan and indulge that and what have you, but work hard at your craft, work hard at your trade, listen to advice and recognize the opportunities when they come along. That's the key to it. Don't feel entitled that you should be in a position because you know everything in a sports quiz. Don't feel resentful. How come that person gets it and I don't get it? Because that doesn't help you in any way whatsoever. Be the best you can be, listen to advice, and recognize the people and the opportunities that will give you a chance to be what you want to be.
That's super spot on. Any future ambitions or side projects in the pipeline?
Wow. I was kind of talking. All my life I've loved playing sport. I really have done, and I wasn't just joking about the Spartan race thing. Many years ago, I suffered a really serious knee injury. I wasn't never much of a football player, but I suffered a really bad knee injury and had my knee rebuilt, and it reoccurred some years later. So I don't get to play football or tennis or anything like that anymore because it's just too risky. But a few years back, I started training hard with my friend John Wilkinson, ex-Singapore international, and a guy who works on my show, and he runs a really nice little boutique gym. So I started training with him, and I found it really, really exciting to do that. And he's the guy that got me fit enough to go and compete in Spartan races. And we do a lot of challenges, and I really I like the fact that I've now taken that into my life. I find it helps me to in my work life. If I'm as fit as I can be, if I know I can take on a grueling physical challenge and complete it, then I can handle anything in everyday life. It's good for the way you feel about yourself. So yeah, I think I just like setting myself challenges. So for example, it could be something like learning how to do a muscle up or something like that, working on stuff, when I'll be 57 soon, and if I can do a muscle up at 57, I think that's a pretty good achievement. So I think just little, micro physical challenges like that, they're cool.
It's a really timely reminder because I really agree with you. Once you have solved health or fitness, right, you can take on any challenge or projects.
Yeah,
how can people reach
you? You know that full well.
Oh, yes, for sure. How can people reach you?
How can people reach me? Right. Okay, that's a good one. I am on Twitter at John Dykes FC. My personal Instagram is John M. Dykes, M for mother. That's John M. Dykes. I'm all over LinkedIn. I quite like using LinkedIn. I've been networking a lot lately. There's a lot of change going on in my industry and my personal life, so it's a good time for me to be talking to clients and potential clients and all sorts of people. And for stuff on me, there is actually a website out there which is John Dykes .online, which contains some of my work, a CV and things like that. So if you want to find out more about me, that's where you go.
Fantastic. And before we let you go, any last words or message to our listeners or viewers who are watching this live on LinkedIn or everywhere else? Any last message to send them off?
My last message would be, if you enjoy football of any kind as much as I do, enjoy this weekend. I think it's going to be sensational. If anyone is watching this who is struggling with what's happening in pandemic life, I feel for you. Keep going, get yourself vaccinated, and just do what you can to get through this, and know that there are so many people who've gone through this and who are coming out the other end. And let's all just hope that we can help each other in any way we can and put this behind us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John, for joining us today. To learn more about our special guest, check out our podcast show notes. We'll put your URL and your Twitter handle in our show notes as well. You've been listening to Sports Gaming Live podcast presented by PodFest Asia. This episode is hosted and produced by me, Wayne Chong. And today I have John Dykes, who contributed to the success of this taping of this podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching or listening. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Cheers. That's John Dykes. Do visit his website, johndykes.online, and his Twitter handle, I think it's John Dykes FC. So with that, I'm going to grab dinner and I'm going to spend the rest of my evening on my couch and just watch all the English Premier League action unravel. And of course, I'll be watching my favorite team, Liverpool, in action as well. So much to look forward to this weekend. But I think at 10 p.m., right, we'll have a musician. His name is Patrick Cheng, who is a local musician from this legendary Singaporean band called the Oddfellas. He'll be gracing our podcast, another podcast under the PodFest Asia network. It's Bucket List Band's podcast. He'll be talking about some of his recent music collection or really released material for his band Oddfellas. It's coming on around 10 p.m. He's also a Liverpool fan, by the way, so I'm going to also ask him for a few predictions on the English Premier League season. So with that, my name is Wayne. I'll be back tonight, 10 p.m. Goodbye. Cheers.